A lot of you may associate end results like this with airbrushing or military modeling. In fact, we've just used some stippling here and quite a lot of trickery. We made plenty of mistakes. It might look pristine now that nothing was pristine as we went through. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to achieve this type of effect. It took me a little bit of a while to figure it out, but that's just part of modeling. So this could definitely be sped up quite a lot. We're going to give a prize to the best suggestion or question about this tutorial below. Maybe give us a suggestion for a future topic to cover. Let's jump in. Okay, so you probably think I'm going to talk about what brushes to start with. Not yet. Straight away, let's talk about some stuff that you don't even realize is making your dry brushing go worse than it could do. And that is stuff from assembly. And it's about kind of observing the model that you've got. So I wonder if any of you have spotted it here. Maybe we should zoom in. Some edges are perfect. Some are better than others. Not all edges are equal. So most of the edges on this model are identical. They have the same type of angle or roundness. This one does not. Okay, try and hold that still. Can you see that? That is where the seal line for making this piece has been cleverly put on an edge to hide it. They didn't manage here. For some reason it's in the middle. So we'd have to flatten that off. Very easily done. And give it a bit of a sand. That'll hide that easily. This one is way sharper than the other edges. You can see they look kind of rounded or beveled. This one's really sharp and that's going to look thin and crappy. So basically we just need to kind of scrape through it whilst tilting the piece around a little bit, and a quick sand, and we are good. Those edges are way more similar now, so when we dry brush them, they're going to look more similar. If any of your edges are too sharp or you want your edge highlights from dry brushing to be fatter, very easy, you just sand the edge a little bit. Super, super simple, fully within your control. Flat sections like this, clip through them as close as possible as you can to them, and then it's pretty much the same, but you're going to be sanding a flat area. And you're looking to minimize this completely if you possibly can. You can prime slightly more heavily, like spray can prime, and that will sometimes hide stuff like that. Or you can put battle damage on it, always a good option. Okay, so brush size selection. Now, I think generally speaking, I'd be correct in saying that most people go way smaller than is necessary for this type of work. You don't need a smaller brush for detail with dry brushing, you need a smaller brush for access. If you've got a big, flat, or swooping or non-obstructed piece like this, you're trying to get into any nooks or crannies, then you do not need to be going for a smaller brush. Generally speaking, this is our D+ set. We've got our classic set as well. D+ is just the sizes in between the existing D, so they're a good kind of pairing for you to add together to have all the options. Regardless though, whether you've got the D or the D+ set, I'd be looking at the top 3 brushes for this, and probably it's going to be these two in the top here underneath the biggest one. So a medium plus or a medium or a large plus would be about perfect. As you are up the higher sizes in the sets, the brushes become more resilient, but it's not just about their life expectancy, it's about the quality of the painting that you can do with them. They've got more bristles and those are packed into a smaller space, and that gives you a smoother result. It's also harder for you to oversaturate them with water. So let's start off with the very different stuff from normal dry brushing. We're going to be using the same brush, start to finish, and we're going to try and achieve a really high quality base coat. That's going to be our foundation. And from there, we'll continue with some stippling, and then we'll do what you would see as probably traditional backwards, forwards, or in circles dry brushing. I've always got an old brush handy for my sit-style pots, and that's because I want to use them from a palette. You can use them from the pot if you're careful. Even if you pop a shot in, that would be amazing. But basically our aim here is to make sure that we're not putting too much paint on the brush. That's probably the biggest single thing that you're doing that I don't do or that I rarely do. Okay, 1 drop of water off the back of the brush that we're using, work it in, and then we should have a kind of a broken sheen of moisture on our finger. This is a good amount for base coating. I've also got some other signifiers that I can look for on my palette. See that water sheen coming off there? That's about right. So I'm always looking for these kind of testing points. Take my paint very carefully, vertically. I'm not scooping it into the brush, I'm just sitting it around the top. I'm not tipping the brush around, it's not a spoon. Base coat wise, now we've done all of that correctly, our base coating is going to be pretty easy. Might take a couple of goes, that's fine. We're trying to make sure that we've got it from all different aspects. See any stuff like this? It's fine, just let it dry before you go in for your second coat. That's where the problems come from. Use a hairdryer, use an airbrush, or just blow on it, or be patient, but that's not an option. We're miniature painters. Not here for patience. And by the time you've done 2 coats, especially if you're using a base paint or something, you should have a pretty good quality base coat that is not too thick, but importantly for me and for us here, it leaves a layer of protection on the edges of your mini that you maybe wouldn't get if you just airbrush that base coat, because we're going to be using a physical technique. We don't want to knock the paint off the edges. That's another big thing that might be making a dry brushing look worse than it could do. And it's a very simple thing to fix. You just need to be a little bit more delicate and lay a foundation down there that's going to help protect the miniature. It is fine to do several base coats if they are fast. What matters and what makes something slow is whether it is objectively slow, not whether you have to do multiple repetitions of it. So doing 2 coats or 3 coats to get a decent quality base coat, nice and flat, no drifts on it, that protects your mini, is pretty invaluable and is always worth doing. Let it fully dry. Said it once, but I'll say it again just in case. Probably should have used a little bit more water in my final step there, or had slightly less in the brush, but that's okay. All right, base coat is achieved. What's next? Color selection. I'm going to jump up more gently than perhaps you maybe would, and this is going to make it look smoother. So if we take a smaller jump up in color, our mistakes are going to be less obvious and it's going to look more subtle. And we're going to do a little bit of a mix as well between this color and our previous color. Contrary to, I think, some, in my opinion, incorrectly held common belief, intermediate steps can make things easier. It's not something that I would see as a tax. It's just a way to get somewhere a little bit more subtly. And if it means I don't have to clean my brush, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of our highlight color, which is the Altdorf, and I'm going to carefully mix it. I'm not scooping loads of paint in. If I take too much of my highlight color, I'm going to have to take too much of my previous color to counter it. So I want to take a little bit, keep things subtle, and we're just going to test elsewhere. All right, stippling time. So first steps first, decide which bit's going to be light and which bit's going to be dark, very important. It is really fine for you to be aggressive on your model, okay? Be gentle here, taking the paint, and then you can use your brush as a brush and it really won't mind, I guarantee it. I don't know what to do with this top panel. It can be, that's gonna be dark. It'll be lighter in that corner. Okay, let all of your steps fully dry. You can see me tipping my miniature around a lot. I'm just trying to see if the light's reflecting off it. So what I'm gonna do is use a little bit of water. You can see that I'm constantly testing here. I can now stipple exactly the same mix as we had, but I'll be doing a softer version. So I'll do that on the edge of my previous step. Oh dear, what's that? There's always some problem. A fluff. A fluff. Don't know what that was. There we go, just a little stipple on the transition is going to make it smoother. You can repeat it as many times as you like, or not do it at all. Right, I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm not doing that by dipping it in the water. We're just cleaning it enough to get a fair bit of the last stage out, not a lot. Every time we involve moisture, our paints are going to get a little bit smoother in terms of what we achieve on the model. It's going to help our brush from getting clogged. It's going to help it from getting dry and scratchy, which might be scratching off your edges. Test elsewhere, and then within the section that we previously did, towards the very bottom where it's the safest in case we make a mistake, in case it's not subtle enough, we're going to do some stippling. Fluffy Dane, that's not a bristle, I don't know what it is. Maybe that's where we put some battle damage. Okay, cool. Looking pretty good. It's quite subtle, so I'm going to continue. We're just using a pure version of this color. I'm not going to go any lighter because I want to save that for the edges. So again, we're keeping it quite subtle until we get to the final steps. Test elsewhere. Luckily, I've got this very bottom section, which I want to be the brightest by far. So I'm using that as my on the model test zone. Getting really close. I'm struggling because of the camera. Whatever angle you need to tilt it at to see it appearing on the mini, make sure that you do so. So I'm looking for just like, it's like the little wet marks that would be appearing from the paint. That's what I'm looking for. And now, oh, I've gone over this edge, don't worry about it, we'll be fixing that. A lot of how I paint is about limiting whether mistakes happen or limiting whether mistakes matter. For this one, it's the second one. Okay, looking pretty cool. I reckon we are nearly there with that. So take some water, and then with some really subtle stipples, you can fade it in. Doesn't have to look perfect. Okay, so what's now? First steps first, give the brush a little clean. You could jump to another brush if you wanted to, because we're jumping around from light to dark. Right, magic tool. This is a kind of military modeling masking tape. It's fantastic. It's very unlikely to pull bits off your model, especially if you did a careful base coat like we did. You can stretch it. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to touch it on some clothing, and that'll remove that kind of the very first slightly more sticky aspect to us. Luckily for us here, our rivets are on the side we want to be painting, not masking. That's very helpful. Right, I can't do this while on camera. If you don't get it exactly on the edge, obviously you should try to. If you can't get it exactly on the edge, don't worry about it, because we are going to be edge highlighting that anyway, so it probably won't be an issue. Careful when ripping and tearing it off, because that's when you'll apply the most force. So really I should have probably just cut that. And I'm going to have to be careful not to stipple up to that, because otherwise I'll put a dark stripe on the model, so I need to stay away from it. Okay, there we go. Weak paints are not bad, they are weak. It's just a different property. So while this might be a bad black if you're looking to get one coat coverage over white, and you'd expect most of your blacks to do that, it is a pretty forgiving one for doing blending with, making mixes, and it mixes really, really well with other paints. So what we're going to be doing, take a little bit of that black, a little bit of the blue. We're going to try and make ourselves slightly darker blue. And we're better off too much softening and dilution than too little. We can make it darker if we need to be. Now we can stipple up to that line. I think that's safely on the side of way too subtle. But like I said, it's better to be there than anywhere else. Press down our masking tape and hope for the best. I should probably try and keep it closer towards the top here. I'll try not to migrate like really far down, especially here, because I'll get punished for that. I cannot reach that line of the tape. I'd be like on the border basically. Because it's such a weak black, I think I can use a little bit more than I was. Keep testing though. Now and make it more subtle. Step on the borders, nothing new here, just what we've already been doing. Get a good look at it, not on the camera, under light with my own eyes. I think we're good there. I'm gonna do some repeating now, just while my face is really close to it, just to make sure that... Be careful hair drying when you've got masking tape on, by the way. It can melt the glue and it makes it behave very differently, and ideally we'd be avoiding that. If you have been too strong with this step, one of the joys of this type of painting is you just go back in with a step that would have been coming next anyway, so we can take our pure base coat. All right, the reveal. I don't know if there's a technique to pulling off the tape, but luckily using still paint, so it should be fine. Green. Nice. Is there a greater satisfaction in the hobby? I think we've been pretty okay there. Looking quite cool. So, what's next? We tie these together, and we're going to do that by taking our highlight color, and we're going to really carefully do some traditional dry brushing all over. I'm making sure that the black is removed. And if you want to check that, extensive notes. You can just test on a piece of paper. I mean, that paper's white, barely any's coming off. We're good. I can also feel how soft the brush feels when testing on the paper really easily. It's got a really good finish. It's not gristly or like grainy. We've been really good with using that brush throughout now. So very careful tying together step. Now, we're going to be concentrating on edges here. We could use a bigger brush at this point very happily, very easily. I like proving a point though, so I'm going to stick with the same brush just to show that I did a decent job of cleaning it, and that you can kind of go start to finish with the same brush as long as you pick a decent sized one. Test carefully. Now what we're going to do is start trying to hit those edges. Edges first, because if you go a bit heavier on them, it doesn't matter so much. And you want to approach every edge from like, if that's the edge, your brush wants to be like this. And then you can do it from the other side like that too. Don't try and go down the edges, you'll smear. You always want to be going directly across them. So with an edge like this, you just got to find that angle and try and approach from both, hope for the best. I'm going to carefully buff this up, really carefully. You can do this when you're confident with how the brush is behaving. Now, this isn't heavy, but you need to hit every edge because we have a final highlight, and the final highlight cannot land on an area that hasn't had this on it. So you've got to hit everywhere with this. Everywhere from every angle. If in doubt, just circle the entire thing. Why the brush setup is very important. I'm going to do another one that is, I say heavier. There's slightly more on the brush, but I'm still going to be very careful. I'm holding my brush further back rather than here. So it's going to flop around a bit more. I'm holding my mini very firmly. Hit this edge from this side when we're confident, and this side when we're confident. Don't forget the bottoms. Circle, circle, circle. Right. Stepping up slightly in color, Calgar. Now, I don't want to do much of this. So if you're taking paint from the pot, this is how delicate you have to be. Dink. You're not aiming to put it in the bristles or up in the brush. So again, we start carefully from the safest angle. Now it's GW, so they tend to go really, really light on the edges. We're going to jump up very, very bravely. Blue Horror, this exists still. It's just no longer classified as an edge, I believe. Do I have it on the table? There we go. It's a layer now. See how white it is? It's dangerous. Got to be really careful. So the more I mix it in my brush, the more I involve water, the more subtle it's going to be. There we go. Look at that. You need it. It's not until the very final step that you kind of sell this in total. Look at that. Crisp. You can repeat as much as you want. You'll be surprised. Maybe you don't need to go and get another paint. You can just repeat, 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 and it'll build it up on top. Do not up the pressure overly, because you might scrape off the work that you've already done. And then when you're really confident, for areas like this, you can just buff it up. You can skip out a load of these steps if you want a more punchy end result, but just take care when you're doing it. Test somewhere, see if it looks like too much of a step up. Right, got that pure Blue Horror on now, or pure. I've only added Blue Horror, but I've still got my other paints in the brush. There we go. Okay, so I've given it a varnish. This is going to help me scrape off some of the white when I put it on if I want to do chipping. You don't have to, especially given that we're not being, really aggressive or using any chemical products. It's optional. I quite like how it ties together different finishes of paint, so this is really uniform now. But yeah, it's up to personal preference. Spray from a can is fine. GW's renamed Purity Seal Monitorum Varnish now. It's really fine, actually. There's nothing wrong with it as a paint. Right, if you're going to paint white, go and clean your water. We have returned with cleaner paint water. Now, we're going to be trying to achieve a white here. At some point, we're going to need that to look like pure-ish white. We're going to dirty it down. For me, this brush is clean enough. This brush is the brush that we've been using all the way through. And if I show you something, there is a line inside my brush where the paint has never been. I didn't just start using this one today. This is an older brush of mine. That is one of the single most important things you can do. I've been talking about not oversaturating your brush at any point. My brushes want to be clean rather than have been killed in a dirty. And it makes a massive difference to the quality of painting that you can achieve, how long they last, a load of other, only positive stuff. Mostly that's to do with being careful taking paint rather than being careful in use, which is the mistake that I think a lot of people make that is simply just not correct. Okay, so we need to mask this off. I have no advice on how to make sure your lines are pointing in the right direction. You just got to work that out yourselves. One thing you can do, which sometimes works out, is you can measure a distance from the edge, and sometimes you can use your own tape as an indication of that. So show what I mean. If I line this up exactly with the edge of my piece, that edge is okay for that. Now what we can do is we can carry on working from that edge, potentially, depending on what width we're going to make our stripe. You know, I could go 2 of this over, or if you find, all right, I've lost my blue masking tape that is half the width of that. You can basically put stripes across it until you're in the place that you'd like to be. I'm gonna have to do this, kind of eyeball it. Hopefully it goes okay. So I think I want it to be just like a little bit. Maybe I can do 2 stripes then. This tutorial is about it being useful, not me looking good. It's also being realistic, right? Things don't always go perfectly at first with mini painting. Okay, yeah, that doesn't quite work out. One thing you can do is use your intended transfers as a barometer. Screw it, we'll go for it. I think they're about okay. Make sure you are aware of where your stippling might get. It's not quite as dangerous as airbrushing, or it's not nearly as dangerous as airbrushing, but you might need to mask off some stop points that needs a little bit of consideration before beginning. That took far longer than it should have. Always does though, right? So we have our clean-ish brush, clean enough. We've got our oil foam, which has started drying out. Carefully take it, and then we're looking to, especially with the first step, be more conservative and quite careful. And we're just looking to begin getting a base coat down. It does not have to be perfect. Take your time, stipple right at it. Don't try and jab into the corners. This is a base coat. So few coats, let it dry, etc. I'm hair drying from really far away, if you're wondering, and that's because by the time the air reached it, it will have cooled down, which is really important. Pretty much there. All right, so we need to darken this towards the top and lighten it towards the bottom. Darkening is going to be done with great care. We get the tiniest bit of Altdorf. Make it really difficult for me to take more than a tiny bit on the brush. Test it. Same as before, gotta be careful with it. Didn't mix it in the brush enough. Only need a tiny bit. Right, now here I actually do need a slightly smaller brush. Done. Finishing touch is going to be a tiny bit of staining towards the bottom. We're going to try and make it look slightly older, a little bit more worn and torn. Prayers. Not so bad. Remove this one because I want to be able to dry brush that edge. Really, a couple of these I would just be doing with a brush, but I want to prove the point that with the right control, you can do quite a lot with a big brush. All right, and then slightly safer reveals, hopefully. Crisp. Oh, I think I should have done my fading slightly stronger. No, it's not safe to try and fix that. Could have been braver with making it darker, would have looked cool, but oh well. Nice. Yeah, it doesn't quite match the aging, but it's still good, and we could have absolutely gone stronger, we just didn't. I'm gonna try a lazy version. Hold with me on this one. See if we can lazily rectify this. What could possibly go wrong? Right. I'm taking the Altdorf Guard Blue. It's the very top of those sections. Safe one's done. Hey, could have probably been a bit more subtle with that, but that works. So it could have been more subtle, but the effect is pretty solid. Dangerous bit now. Clean brush, just water. So what you're seeing here is the varnish that we used previously has kind of retarded the paint a little bit, or at least it's put a glossy, resilient surface under it, so we can gently agitate that paint off with water and just a normal brush. This is our heavily used paint mixing brush here that we're using. A couple of them came out slightly larger than would have been ideal. It's not a worry at all. What we're going to do now is enhance it with some transfers. For me, the most important thing when using transfers is you can either use patience or you can use a hairdryer. No points for guessing which one I used. But the really important thing is to allow time for evaporation, which of course you can speed up by using a hairdryer. So laid it down, pressed it flat, taking out the excess, and then there's a couple of steps where I'm just going to let it dry, or I'm going to accelerate that drying time using the hairdryer. What that'll do is the transfer with the solution used or with the water will almost perfectly match the surface of what it's on. That's especially easy on a flat surface. This isn't a curved shoulder pad. So we've really helped ourselves here, and that's going to get it very, very, very smooth. Or rough, if the undersurface is rough. Either way, it's going to match the surface it's on pretty much perfectly. We had some problems here though, because my transfers weren't even matching colors. So I had to do my best to try and fix them. I didn't do it perfectly, but we're going to hide the kind of general mess of that underneath more mess and weathering. So while that's not pristine, it shouldn't matter once we've kind of pulled attention. This is no different from the normal stuff we do on the channel. The edges take kind of attention away from your smooth transitions, make them look smoother. And any faults that we've got, we should be able to kind of pull attention away from and just generally age and make it look a little bit more haggard. Careful stippling here, and that's going all over the white section as well, not just on the symbol. Popping down some speedy edges. You'll notice they're not completely uniform. I've kind of stuttered them on and off, and then we're scratching here. Sorry for the focus on this bit. Very, very important bits coming up soon. So all these scratches look pretty decent. I've set up my brush very carefully. We'll have a video linked on the screen for setting up your brush well now. This is the important bit though. Pop that little dot down above each of the scratches and it'll just make it look like it's been indented into the material. It's a magic step and it's very, very easy in comparison to trying to put a line above them. Trying to sell our chipped edges now. You can always Google some stuff like old tractors is a good one, or heavy duty machinery, anything like that. I've got a load of reference pictures on my phone. There we go. Matte varnished using contrast medium actually, tied it all together, and apart from that very white background to the ultramarine symbol, pretty good. Thank you very much for watching. Please do give us your suggestions. Would you like to see more vehicle stuff done? What do you not think we could achieve by Drybrush? How about you give us a challenge? Please like, please comment. A few of you aren't subscribed, so please consider that. We put out really, really consistent levels of content on dry brushing and all uses of our brushes, and give us any suggestions down below.